initiatives that can be taken to mitigate its effects?
The reason why we feel it's a very important issue is the failure of education. It's not the brain drain that is the challenge. Our education is so incredibly flawed, so deficient. The real loss is that most of our gene pool is wasted because of substandard, make-believe, tragic education. You address that, rest of the problems can be fixed.
How do you think we can make our country a very, habitable, or you could say, very attractive or lucrative prospect for not just our own students, but also students from across the world to come?
Designing of the evaluation in a manner that real outcomes, namely comprehension and communication in language, not rote learning, conceptual understanding and applying the concepts for problem solving in mathematics, and logical framework to derive conclusions from given facts in science.
What are the factors that should be considered while determining the right path for both personal and professional fulfillment?
If we really do what is natural to us, which we love most, we are most likely to succeed, we are most likely to enjoy. Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm good, sir.
May I have your name?
My name is Prajay, sir. I'm a third year UG student from the Department of Mathematics at IIT Kharagpur.
Did you say Prajay?
Prajay, sir.
Prajay, okay.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, I'm at your disposal.
Yeah, so I'm currently a governor at a Public Policy and Governance Society, sir.
Okay.
So,
Sir, good evening, sir. Myself, I am Sagurti Dinaraju.
Good evening, Dinaraju. How are you? Where are you from?
I'm fine, sir. I'm from Hyderabad, sir.
Hyderabad. Okay.
Actually, before starting the event, I just wanted to give an overview of how we have got an idea. So first of all, thank you for giving us an opportunity to interact with you.
My
as well, my whole family and my father is a big fan of you, sir, since from his young age, and I am also a big fan of you, sir. It's like maybe my future generation also. The work and the hard work, the struggles, and each and every step of your journey, it's like a very inspiration for us. So, one of my friend is working in FTR, sir. Through that, we have got the contact for Ankit Garu, and we now very like Ankit Garu have helped us a lot. So, before just starting, I just want to give an overview.
We are together.
You see, many of your interviews, especially in recent days, these online interactions were quite good, sir. We thought of going with an offline interaction, but Ankit Garu has suggested for an online one.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. I am Agrim Chaudhary. I am a third year undergraduate student at IIT Kharagpur, and I am a policy head at Public Policy and Governance Society. So first of all, thanks a lot for your time, sir. Thanks a lot for taking out your time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
As I think Sagurti has already expressed, this is not really an interview or something. This is more like this is just an opportunity. This is just an opportunity for us to talk to you and for us to interact with you, and that's it. So starting with that.
Agreem, if possible, make sure that our team cameras are on so that we can, our faces also,
sure.
Dr. JP can see. Okay?
Sure, I'm doing that.
Dinaraju, where are you located now?
Yes, sir, I'm in campus itself.
In the campus.
I'm doing my dual degree at IIT Kharagpur, sir.
Okay, what does it mean, dual degree?
BTech plus MTech, sir. Usually takes around 4 plus 2 years. It's 6 years, of course, but for us here, 4 plus 1. BTech plus MTech.
Okay. Which branch is it?
So I'm doing major in biotechnology and biochemical engineering and micro and entrepreneurship.
Right.
Yeah, so moving forward with the slide. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Agrim.
Interesting name. I thought Arvind without seeing the name. What does it mean, Agrim?
Sir, the word Agrim basically it's a Hindi word which means something in advance or to be ahead. So basically.
Okay, first time I heard
that. So yeah, Prajay, can we move forward with the slide? Prajay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Agrim. You can continue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Change
please
the slide.
change. Yeah, please move forward with the slide, as I said. Okay, so sir, well, obviously, it's as I said, it's an unbelievable. It's our honor to talk to you. This is basically for those who are joining in for the audience. This is a brief introduction about sir. Uh, he has obviously achieved a lot, starting from his journey in the UPSC Civil Services as an IAS officer. Then from there, he moved on to politics as the founder for democratic reforms and founder of the Lok Satta party, which is, I feel, doing a great job. And we'll talk about that as well later on in our discussion. So moving on, Prajay. Yeah, for sir and for the audience, this is just briefly about us, Public Policy and Governance Society at IIT Kharagpur. This is a slightly newer society, you can say. We are in our nascent stage, but where we are looking to basically fill in is in the domain or in the space wherein we feel that, at IIT Kharagpur, we are mostly producing engineers. But I feel that aside from the engineering domain, be it mechanical, like I'm pursuing my bachelor's in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. So I feel aside from the course curriculum of mechanical, civil, electrical, all that we study, I feel public policy and governance is something which all of us should know in order to become a responsible citizen of our country. And that is where we want to come in. That is where we want to contribute firstly for the students of IIT Kharagpur and post that beyond that for all college students in India. So this is our vision, mission, and motto. So yeah, moving on. So sir, we would like to start a discussion obviously with something which I feel is a topic of great interest and great importance for us students. So as a third year student, I've already seen a lot of my seniors, go abroad for studies and all that. And brain drain, I think today is something that is not just there in within the country. It's something outside the country. It's there within the country as well, as in people from one state migrating to some very selective few states where there are more industries and which have a greater GDP contribution for our nation. What is your take on the brain drain among the Indian youth? And as somebody who has obviously been there in the public sector, what do you think are the initiatives that can be taken to mitigate its effects?
Great question, Agrim. Let me start off by congratulating all of you. I'm impressed particularly by the words I've used: impassioned, rigorous examination, deliberation, engagement, acting as catalyst, critical thinking, innovation, collaboration. I think you have summed up it all in your summary of what you are about. These are exactly the kind of qualities and actions that are required. I congratulate you for this very earnest attempt and a very practical attempt. Now about the brain drain. The reason why we feel it's a very important issue is the failure of education. It's not the brain drain that is the challenge. We always think of, my God, how many kids are going to US or something else. Every year, typically about a crore, 10 million plus youngsters are graduating from universities in India. There are about 40 million, 38 to 40 million youngsters in colleges and universities in India. So my guess is about 10 million plus are graduating every year in the country. If 10 million really are worthy graduates, they are actually accomplished and they have the skills and they have the productivity, then losing about 100,000, 200,000 or 300,000 is not a big issue. The reason why we feel brain drain is a big issue is, and I know we all know this, but some people have to say it openly, 80 to 85% of the graduates, they only have a piece of paper which means nothing. Our education is so incredibly flawed, so deficient. Let me be a little blunt. In most colleges and universities, if you mug up last 3 years question papers effectively in the last 1 week, you not only pass, but you get a first class. Now, if that is graduation, obviously only a small percentage, 10-15%, and a very, very tiny proportion like yours, the IITs, 0.1% or something in the country, they are reasonably accomplished and skilled. Because we're losing a significant proportion of these IITians and the high-end people, we feel the pinch. The answer does not lie in saying, look, you should not go abroad. That's an absurd notion. A, it impinges freedom. B, it doesn't really help the country. I always say brain drain is better than brain in the drain. If you don't know how to utilize the talent available, what's the point of lamenting about brain drain? And in any case, the people who are going abroad, let's be truthful, they are bringing back enormous amount of talent, ideas, technology, investment, innovation, etc. Take the medical field with which I am familiar. Many of my friends and others who went abroad, they brought back very high order of skills. India now is the destination for some of the high-end interventions like, complete knee replacement, let us say, or kidney transplantation, or coronary bypass surgery, or something else. We are as good as anywhere in the world at the lowest cost, with the best safety standards. Now, without our kids going outside the country and training, we probably would not have got those things. So, to think of brain drain as a loss to the country is a very wrong way of looking at it. The real loss is that most of our gene pool is wasted because of substandard, make-believe, tragic education. You address that, rest of the problems can be fixed.
So regarding this, actually, I wanted to know, you obviously talked about the fact that a lot of graduates, they just have a degree on paper, but not really some, real life skills that can be leveraged in anywhere in today's world in the industry. How do you think
Absolutely.
how do you think we can make our country a very, habitable, or you could say, very attractive or lucrative prospect for not just our own students, but also students from across the world to come here to either study or, take on jobs in the industry? With regards to that, what are the policy initiatives that we should take?
It's a very broad question. Let me try and identify a few specifics. For any kind of rejuvenation, the starting point is quality school education. If you focus only on colleges and universities and IITs, you will not get anywhere. Because a nation's future depends on the average, not on the exceptional. Exceptional people bring the skills and their talents and innovation anyway. But whether the nation is marching or not depends on the average. School education must be the starting point. And outcome measurement, appropriate designing of the evaluation in a manner that real outcomes, namely comprehension and communication in language, not rote learning, conceptual understanding and applying the concepts for problem solving in mathematics, and logical framework to derive conclusions from given facts in science. The kind of things that are tested in very acclaimed examinations all over the world. For instance, PISA, Program for International Students Assessment. India ranked second from bottom, the only time we participated. And our shameful response is that we will not participate in PISA again. In 2009, we were ranked second from bottom. Luckily, Kyrgyzstan was bottom at that time out of 74 countries. And since then, India did not participate. We must relish participation, prepare our kids for that kind of study, impart those kinds of skills. Even in the government assessments, officially in many states, the pass percentage is 95, 96%, whereas government admits in the national achievement surveys, only 25 to 30% actually are achieving even a reasonable level of standards compared to the minimum levels of learning expected of them at that level. So I believe in a large system of 28 crore, 280 million kids in schools all over the country, in private, government, all kinds of syllabi and so on and so forth. The easiest way, while a number of other things are required by way of inputs, the easiest way is change the demand pattern, because we all care for examinations and success and ranks. Use it skillfully to design an evaluation system which is sensible without too much pressure, but what actually measures genuine outcomes. Now, college education is a derivative of that. We now have actually a reasonably sound policy at long last. It took a long time. Charles Eliot, the very famous president of Harvard University, he was there for 30, 40 years as president. He introduced electives about 150 years ago. Now, after almost every great university in the world has an elective system, India has discovered that in the national education policy at long last. Some degree of flexibility is now available. Therefore, the broad approach is reasonably right. The challenge is, how do you make it happen in a large and diverse country with a federal system? We must make it as a movement. And if we do it, I'm sure that the kids and the parents will respond, because there's enormous demand for education in this country. And the parents sacrifice a great deal, and society values education. Now, 20 years ago, I think, almost 20 years ago, I was in China with a high-powered group from India. One thing that struck me was, there were two things that struck me. Chinese school education was exceptional. Wherever I went, when I asked questions of people, The taxi drivers, the ordinary people, the tourist employees, and all kinds of people, even low-end workers. They were very precise and accurate in their answers. You could gauge that the school education is a fairly high standard, uniformly. The second thing that struck me is almost everybody in China told me higher education in India was bad, their words. In China, higher education was bad, and they admired Indian higher education because they saw the IITs and IIMs, and they wrongly believed that all of India has this fantastic education because of your brand image. Of course, as an Indian, I would maintain silence. I would not say how our education is bad. But within these 15, 20 years, China has now become number 2 in higher education. You take the patents, the R&D, generation of new knowledge, the quality of output in universities and colleges, it's phenomenal. To build a great university takes generations, and yet you can accelerate the process if you have the national will and hire the best talent, give them the flexibility and freedom, and really measure their outcomes appropriately. I think India has all the ingredients in place except bad policy. And we must completely relook at the higher education, and the national education policy is a fairly reasonable document. We can have some, no, the problem with the policy document in a country as complex as India is, they try to please everybody, every section. Therefore, there will be a lot of perfunctory things. If you actually go into the essence of what they're saying, much of it makes a lot of sense, long overdue. I think we must get going. And in a way, there's also an opportunity with technology. What was once a very elite education in universities at very high cost, today, at a very low cost, actually the same skills can be transmitted. For instance, I'm told MIT's whole course is now open source software. While a degree in a prestigious university gives you a lot of brand image and networking, really, if it's the acquisition of knowledge and skills, you don't really have to even go to a university. In that way, the democratization of knowledge actually is an opportunity if you skillfully use it. I think the time is right now.
Yeah, those are very interesting insights from you, sir. So I'd like to move on to our next topic of discussion. So we obviously talked about the current landscape of Indian education system and the democratization of knowledge. So in the current landscape, a lot of people, they tend to focus on financial stability more than pursuing their passion or what they want to do. And this is especially true because at IITs, I've seen most of the people are from middle class families, lower or middle income households, and this is particularly prevalent in those cases. In your opinion, firstly, I would like to know, sir, what is your take on this? And secondly, what are the factors that should be considered while determining the right path for both personal and professional fulfillment?
I think it's a great question, Agrim. I think there's not a family in the country who is not conflicted on this issue, including mine, including my childhood. Because we are an insecure society, just now trying to emerge from poverty, still a largely poor society. Therefore, if parents who love kids to death in our country, parents sacrifice a great deal, they're willing to give up their lives for the children. I think in a broad sense, for all of us, this is true. Hindu, Muslim, North, South, upper class, lower class, rich, poor, village, urban. It's a very fairly common thing in India. And that's a good part. But the negative part of that is there is so much of fear about the future of the children that parents obviously, with good intentions, put some pressure on you to go into what they believe are secure occupations and courses. That is the crux of the problem. But it's not entirely negative. First of all, no, I know at a young age it's very easy to be dismissive of parents and be embarrassed about them. But please be a little more considerate and understanding. While some of what parents do is stupid, it's a stupidity that comes out of love, comes out of concern for you. So we also must know how to persuade them. And the time is getting better. 40, 50 years ago, economy was so constricted, opportunities were so limited, it was much harder to persuade. But today, increasingly opportunities are emerging. If economic security is the issue, I think there's now a greater and greater opportunity in the country to demonstrate to the parents and yourselves that whatever you pursue, whatever line of inquiry you pursue or study you pursue, there are realistic opportunities to make a good living and make a mark in life. And it's only going to get better, not worse. Now, insofar as how should anybody choose, I don't know if there is any universal answer. Each of us must find a way. But a broader principle I would advocate is, if we really do what is natural to us, which we love most, we are most likely to succeed, we are most likely to enjoy. If it's not a chore, if it's some, many people by virtue of their genetic endowment or their ability, etc., they can do many things very well. But if we decide what is the one area where I'll bring the best value, I can do as well as anybody else maybe in many areas, but which is the area where uniquely I'm qualified or my mind and my heart are completely fused to get the best value. And what is the value depends on an individual. Some people may say, I want to achieve the highest corporate success. Some people may say, I want to make the most money. Some people may say, I want to promote the most public good. Some people may say, I want to ensure the greatest amount of education is going to everybody in the country. No, what is the value is something you have to define. As long as it's a meaningful goal, that's perfectly all right. Once you decide that, you must decide where you bring the best value. In which area of inquiry or study or expertise. If we take that decision, 90 out of 100 will be happy and will be productive and will be successful.
Got it, sir. So basically it's essentially about value creation and addition, as in where we can add value to the society in general. So that's actually a very nice take on that. So moving on.
I think the correct word might be the impact, maybe.
Yeah,
impact on
of course, impact. Yeah, impact creation and impact, definitely, sir. And so moving on, I think an unfortunate reality in our society is obviously the prevalence of corruption. And from corruption, I think arises the need for transparency and accountability. So speaking in a slightly constricted manner within educational institutions, and even law enforcement agencies for that matter, how do you think we can combat corruption and ensure that there's transparency and accountability for, say, someone like me, just an ordinary citizen, or maybe a student at an institute?
Oh my gosh, it's a phenomenal question. It requires a whole, not one book, but a series of books. Let me very briefly give a glimpse of my own understanding, a bit about education, but a bit more about the generic issue of corruption in India. Education, offhand, there are 2-3 areas we talk about when we talk about corruption. One is obviously fee structure. You're fleecing from the students, schools in particular, many people complain, etc. Another is in admissions, the corruption in admissions, the non-transparent or corrupt, and then leakage of examination or mass copying. So corruption, broadly speaking, in a variety of forms. Obviously, you must create a system which is foolproof in terms of copying. I wish I could say it's not common, but I am increasingly told that mass copying has become ubiquitous in our education system in many colleges and schools. I remember either me watching or somebody telling me in Uttar Pradesh, when a government decided that at least they will try and curb copying in schools, the Minister of Education was brought before the audience in a TV channel and put in the dock, and an anchor, I believe, asked the question, how can you stop copying when poor kids will suffer if copying is not there, they will not pass. And the poor minister had to defend his decision and say, no, I don't mean to hurt the poor people. If this is the kind of discussion in a national channel in the country, it's so depressing. I'm a great optimist, but these are moments when I feel a sense of anger and despair both. So we have to address this. But about money question, that is what most people talk about when they talk about corruption. Private education is an offshoot of government's failure. Now, treating private sector as the enemy, because we are in India very famously addicted to socialist notions without understanding the meaning of socialism, and therefore anything private is corrupt and bad and sinful, anything corrupt governmental is noble. It's a very silly idea. Schools mostly and colleges, they have come about because the government failed spectacularly. If there is single biggest failure of Indian governance process, it is education in the country, in a country where the demand is so great. So now private sector is trying to fill in the gap. They're not doing a great job because the framework is not good, but that's not their fault. Now to therefore treat them as enemies and then try to regulate the fee structure, this is very populist but very dangerous. What we require is make it a transparent mechanism. If my kid goes to a school or a college, what exactly are the amenities and who are the teachers? What is their background and qualifications? And then what is the fee structure? Then I decide whether I would want it or not. Instead of some babu sitting there or a group committee sitting there and deciding this is the fee structure that I impose on you. First of all, the amenities and the quality of education are completely varying, and therefore you cannot impose a certain standard. And second, that leads to phenomenal corruption. In India, you make more laws, you create more corruption. Now, the broader issue of corruption. Corruption is a bit like cancer. In medical parlance, we use the word cancer. Cancer is very simple in terms of definition, that a tissue is needlessly proliferating, causing harm to the body. Cell division is taking place unregulated, causing harm to the body. While there is a generic definition, the form of cancer varies from organ to organ. Within an organ, again, the nature of cancer varies. Therefore, the treatment varies. So is it the corruption. While corruption, broadly, we understand abusing public office for personal gain and taking money as a consideration for a decision or action, and so on and so forth. That's easy to understand. But the way to address corruption depends on the kind of corruption. First, let me address the issue of morality, because we are very fond of talking of morality in India. Indians, and I'm saying this with complete sense of responsibility, are as moral as anybody else in the world, perhaps even more moral. Given our background, given our failure of rule of law, given our woeful failure of governance, most Indians, most of the time, are remarkably gentlemanly, remarkably upright in their conduct in public domain. So it's not a morality issue. It's a very common misconception in India. It is an institutions and incentives issue. Because you created a culture of scarcity, corruption grew. Because you created a culture of non-delivery of services which you're entitled to get, day-to-day extortionary corruption became endemic, because you can't fight every day for a birth certificate and waste your time, energy, money, and so on and so forth. And you can go on and on. Therefore, you address the cause. Let me give you some illustrations. It's a very wide topic, and people like me have been fighting for a lifetime. But let me give you a few illustrations. Take telephones. 30 years ago, to get a telephone was a Herculean task. And after waiting for years and paying astronomical sums by way of own your telephone scheme or this or that, again, you have to give some bakshis to make sure that you are allotted. And after allotment, you have to give some bakshis for somebody to install it. Every month it will go out of order, you have to gain. No, that was endemic. Today, none of this is true. All of us have telephones of very high quality service and very low cost. Not one of us paid a bribe. Morality has not improved. We change the way things are done. Competition, choice, and technology. Railway reservations. Your generation will not even understand. Ask your parents and grandparents. 40, 50 years ago, you wanted a railway berth. Inevitably, you have to take some 20, 30 rupees in those days, a princely sum of money. And then you must put it in the hands of the ticket conductor or whatever that person's name is to get a berth. Today, in 95% cases, that's not necessary by simple technology and transparency and computerization. Take passports. Even 20 years ago, there was a lot of delay and corruption. Today, they systematize the process. Corruption has come down. Take 2G spectrum that sent shockwaves when all of you were probably kids in school, those in the IITs now. That's how the whole anti-corruption movement and then our party came, but that was a different issue. When everybody was fighting about putting people in jail, I said, look, all that's okay. We talk big and nothing happens because there are bigger issues at work here, the rule of law failure. Let us at least take this as an opportunity to end corruption in allocation of spectrum and other natural resources. I mobilized 15, 20 eminent Indians, and I led them and went to the Supreme Court. And on the basis of arbitrary allocation of spectrum, I asked the court to cancel that 122 licenses. You don't have to prove corruption. They were simply allocated in an arbitrary, non-scientific, non-transparent way. That's good enough. And I asked the court to order mandatory competitive bidding process in a transparent manner in allocation of spectrum. The court ordered that. Since then, I can guarantee you, there's not 1 rupee of corruption in spectrum allocation in India. So change the way it's done. But the particular way for a particular method of corruption, it varies, depending on the context and the nature of the issues involved. I can go on and on. Ultimately, the 2-3 broad issues we have to address. One is the extraordinary corruption in which people are compelled to pay a bribe without getting anything out of turn. The birth certificate, the ration card, the water connection, the electricity connection, 100 other things. 58% of the households of India, 58% of the households of India are forced to pay a bribe at one point of time or the other in a single year. There is not a family in India which is not compelled to pay a bribe somewhere, some amount, for no fault of theirs. Don't criminalize people and say bribe givers are all bad in those cases. Those cases, because of the failure of service delivery and abnormal cost of not getting that service, we are forced to pay a bribe. Create a framework in which the service delivery is automatic and the responsibility is fixed on them. Citizens' charters, other modes are available. Similarly, in other forms of things, as I told you, transparency, state understanding its role and playing the role effectively, economic freedom, competition, choice, etc. At the end of all this, you have to look at two things. One, is there an incentive structure where if you are corrupt, there is a fairly high degree of certainty of being punished severely? Not only in terms of jail, but actually losing all property. That's a more severe punishment than going to jail. That whatever ill-gotten money I earned, me and my children will not get a paisa. If that is assured, then corruption will end. That means you have to create independent institutions that actually work effectively outside political or bureaucratic interference. Rule of law is effective. Lokpal, a great opportunity was squandered. Its conception was bad initially. At least people like me worked hard to make sure that the law was right. We corrected it. But because of the way things happened for a variety of reasons, now we have a colorless, tasteless, orderless Lokpal. We must actually build regular, genuine institutional capacity to address corruption. Finally, without addressing money in politics, the illegitimate money that is flowing into politics on a very vast scale, you cannot address corruption because the demand side is unaddressed. Even if you stop supply in some areas, the demand is unchecked. Other areas, you forcibly open up. That's why Shah Rukh Khan's son is alleged to have had in his possession some 2-3 grams of ganja. First of all, ganja is not even a very harmful drug. Many countries liberalized it. Germany just last week said ganja is no longer criminalized. Second, whether he had it in possession or not, I do not know. But what happened? I believe crores of rupees were demanded as a bribe just to give him bail. So unless the demand side is addressed, some avenue or other will keep opening up. The central demand of corruption is coming from money power, illegitimate money power is coming from politics. Therefore, nature of politics must be addressed. Can we create an electoral system where this vast distribution of crores and crores, in some states you may not see it, but let me assure you, in many southern states minus Kerala, some other states, astronomical sums are being spent illegitimately and unaccountably. And until that is addressed, this drive for corruption in some form or other also will continue to grow. So it's a multifaceted problem. It's not a hopeless situation. Like it's not a values issue. It is institutions issue. Wherever you have done the right things, corruption has come down dramatically. That's the lesson. So we must learn to do the right things in other areas also and find the will to do it.
So what's your, I would actually just adding on to here, I would like to know your opinion on the recent decision regarding electoral bonds. How do you see that movement?
Great question, Akram. Again, we can do grandstanding. In Indians are very, very fond of grandstanding in India, and I'm very moral giant, you're all bad kind of thing, But we must be very honest and very insightful. This whole issue, in a way, started with me and Lok Satta movement. In 2001, again, most of you probably were not born because you probably were not 21 or 22 years of age. So 22 years ago, 23 years ago, there was a scandal in India called Tehelka scam. A newspaper called Tehelka captured a few politicians, prominent politicians, collecting or receiving cash donations. In this case, probably the two persons caught on camera were for legitimate political activity, but in cash they collected. It was a common practice because there was no other viable mechanism. One of them was Mr. Bangaru Lakshman, the then BJP president, who was forced to resign. Another was Defense Minister Fernandez, who was also forced to resign until he was cleared by a judicial commission. I used it as an opportunity to reach out to every single political party and major leader in the country and tell them, look, we can't address overnight this money in politics, the vote buying and so on and so forth. At least the legitimate money required for political activity must be legitimately raised. We must incentivize that. We must make it easy. And this indignity of collecting by cash and this suspicion of quid pro quo, all this must be given up. And we must have an honorable method. They all embraced the idea. And on our recommendation at the time, they enacted a law in 2003, Election and Other Related Laws Amendment Act, the By Which Income Tax Act, Companies Act, the Representation of People Act, etc., they were all amended to do two things. One, to give 100% tax exemption to the donors. For individuals, unlimited amount. For corporates, 5% of the net average profit. That's what we proposed at the time, net average profit over 3 years. The second is to give free air time in all electronic media, because we anticipated that in the coming years, it's the television, electronic media, social media was unheard of. But that's also an electronic media. So we anticipated that increasingly electronic media will play an important role in election campaigning. So if that is addressed by some means, the legitimate needs of politics in terms of cost will be curbed. So we said as part of licensing condition, private or government electronic media must give free time. The law was enacted encompassing both. The second one was never operated. Rules were not framed, electronic media, so I'll leave it at that. The first one was implemented. Arun Jaitley was the law minister at that time. Mr. Jaitley told me at least 7-8 occasions subsequently what actually happened. When BJP decided not to collect money by cash henceforth, they said, look, when you are getting full tax exemption, for you there's no loss on account of paying by check. Otherwise, what will happen? By cash, there's no tax paid. By check, you pay the tax and then you give a contribution. That means to give a 100 rupee contribution, you have to actually earn 150 rupees, a double jeopardy. Now that is removed here. There is no tax on the contribution made. So why should I want cash? Please give me only by check. It was a very nice decision. But within 2 months, they discovered that 90% of the donors stopped contributing. The money stopped coming in when they said, we won't receive cash. When they checked up what's happened, donors said, we are afraid to fund any party openly because other parties will go after us. There will be retribution because we don't have a rule of law framework in India where you can support a political party and survive the economic vagaries visiting on you because of that. Governments still decide they have the power to make or unmake your fortunes. Unlike in America, Britain, and other countries where a billionaire can do whatever he wants politically, support whomever he likes, fund whomever he likes, and be unafraid of consequences economically. It doesn't touch them. Whereas in India, we don't have that. And that's when the next time the opportunity came for Arun Jaitley to be in power, as finance minister, he brought in this hybrid mechanism. A transparent funding to the parties in the sense that money is openly given by check. Money is spent honestly for a legitimate activity. It gets tax exemption, but the donor source is not revealed to protect him. Obviously, it's not the perfect solution. Now, court rightly said that's not acceptable. But what will happen is, unless we actually work very hard on improving rule of law, what will happen is the money that's at least now accountably going, even if not very transparently because the donor source is not known, that now will go underground as cash money. I can guarantee you, sitting here, I'll tell you, in the coming years, you will find very little money by check and a lot of money by cash, which of course is unaccounted, therefore everybody can pretend everything is okay. And we have experience, 2004 to 2012-13, in 8 years after this law was implemented, only 8.9% went in an accountable manner from known sources. 91.1% was from unknown sources. So we already have a track. We know exactly what's going to happen. So that's why we have to look deeper and figure out a way of creating a legitimate funding mechanism. And having said that, at the end of the day, all this is red herring. Real challenge of India is not the money that's legitimately required for the party functioning or election campaign. It is the vote buying and the illegitimate activities. 90% money in politics is vote buying and illegitimate activities. That's a different issue altogether because the expenditure itself is immoral, illegal, wrong. We must stop it. There, we must address the incentives and the electoral system rather than the law and regulation and so on and so forth.
Like, thanks a lot for insights on that. So, on a related topic, moving on, Prashant. Yeah, so like as I've spoken previously about financial stability and all as well. So, in the current scenario, getting employment is obviously the #1 priority for a lot of students. What, in your opinion, sir, are the steps that can be taken to ensure that the educational curricula it is aligned with the demands of the modern job market? Like we're talking about being in Industry 4.0, Web 3.0, and all that. How do you think our educational curricula should be aligned with that?
Agreem, if there is one incredibly...
One second, sir. So
Yes,
adding a small question. So it's like, so it's been a trend since our from childhood. It's like in a even Agrim also has said that when we are born boy or a girl, and especially in South India, a middle class family, the boy born, he will be definitely be an engineer or a doctor. So it's been a trend. We are seeing from our childhood ki 10th class, एक बार 10th class हो गया कि you will be going to the engineering college you will get a job, and job you go to government, and then business or politics is like this. There's a being a trend. So adding this one as a scenario, please answer this one.
No, it's a great question. There are three layers to this, as I understand, offhand. The first is the skills. Most people don't have skills, and they are unemployable. And your actually second part of the question addresses that challenge. We'll come to that a little bit later. The second is, where are the jobs? Even if I have skills, an estimated 13 million young people are coming into the job market every year, the world's largest ever number. And it will never be exceeded because there's no other country which will have greater population than India in human history forever. So this is about the peak. Now, where are 13 million jobs? That's not an issue of education and skills alone. It's also about economic management, infrastructure, investment promotion, innovation, and a whole lot of other things. The third is, even if these two things are addressed, how do you ensure that in a large country with 65% rural population even now, with 45% depending on agriculture even now, with 82 to 85% in an organized sector, with very insecure, precarious livelihoods, how do you spread the fruits of growth and opportunities of employment wider? All three strands must be addressed. Otherwise, this country will not be able to sustain itself. I'm a great optimist, but there are tremendous economic, political, and social dangers ahead. Because of social controls in India, strong society and tradition, somehow we are able to overcome these monumental challenges and have a modicum of order and peace and relative crimelessness. But that good fortune will not last for long. With increasing urbanization and atomized lives and impersonal lives and aspirations and anger, that will not remain. So the first question, what you said, and I think it's beginning to happen. We should not lose heart. The new national education policy is a sound one. If we really implement it and internalize it, take it above petty politics. And market is actually responding. Let me talk about my alma mater. Before I went to medicine, I went to a +2 college, Andhra College, a Jesuit college, a famous college. At the time, then Andhra Pradesh, probably the best, arguably the best college. Now, later on, for a couple of decades, that college, like many other undergraduate institutions, collapsed. Because there was no demand, as Sagurti said. Everybody wanted to be a doctor or engineer. Therefore, +2 means you go to a coaching institution. In the north, it is Kota. In the south, in Andhra Pradesh, it's Chaitanya, Narayana, or whatever. We all know the drill. So there's no real passion for undergraduate education, either +2 education in a college, traditionally, or an undergraduate education. Most of it is lost meaning. Now they have discovered a way of doing it. I went to the Loyola Academy in Hyderabad the other day. Loyola College, I understand from friends what's happening. They now responded to the market and they're making flexible courses. The silly old approach of government assistance and aided colleges and aided posts, all this is given up by and large. And they're figuring out where actually the skills are productive, useful, and where the market is rewarding the skills, where placements are there. And then increasingly parents and kids are getting a little smarter than earlier. And they're looking for those skills which give them employment opportunities. So in a way, market is working. All we need to do is nudge the system a little better and faster and on a bigger scale and see that the kids are not cheated. Because if somebody says, I offer you this skill, give me 50,000 fee and you get a job, obviously you'll fall for that. That's where transparency and sensible, limited regulation so that at least we make informed choices is necessary. Along with the national education policy and institutions doing a job to promote R&D and to promote innovation and to really spread a variety of skills required for a complex economy. The second issue of creating jobs is much more complex. I am increasingly committed to rapid economic growth. I believe even at the cost of everything else, if we don't pursue this one single thing for the next 20, 25 years and seize the opportunities, I shudder to think of the future. That means fiscal prudence on the part of the government. You can't simply eat your way into a better future. You're required to consume today for your needs and to take care of the immediate needs of the people. That is short-term welfare, individual welfare. But you must also invest into the future of a long-term public good. There must be a very healthy balance. Some states have it, some states don't have it. I have plenty of evidence. I don't want to go into details. We published a whole document on that. So the single biggest challenge easily to be addressed is the financial discipline on the part of the governments and putting a lot of money, at least the borrowed money, not going for consumption, but for investment in the future, infrastructure, investment, promotion, job creation, etc. And we have to create a framework in which, even today, we had a long discussion with somebody who came from the US, very much like you all, went to US, went to Columbia, became an entrepreneur, became very successful, very worried and passionate about India, and arguing very strongly about what needs to be done to deregulate many areas of activity to grow the economy. So we really have to do all those things. It's not enough if government builds infrastructure. Then in terms of spreading the fruits of development, much of the development is now felt only in big cities. If people with low level of skills are forced to migrate to distant big cities, it's a tragedy for the country and tragedy for these people. You have seen what happened in the wake of COVID pandemic when people were forced to go back to their villages when there were no jobs in the towns, the kind of monumental tragedy we all witnessed in the country. It's not only immoral, it's very dangerous for the country. So unless we allow the growth of a large number of small towns, this is important in my judgment. This is not talked about. So the notion of developing 600,000 villages in India is a bit far-fetched. It will never happen. You can do what you can to give electricity, to do some things, but ultimately, unless there is aggregation of population in a large number of small towns, there is no way you can actually bridge agricultural economy with industrial and service economy, rural areas with urban areas. Therefore, the growth of small towns, so that for low-skilled people, there can be in situ urbanization and local migration without losing the social support system, and have enough skills to be able to survive. And at a relatively low income compared to big cities, they can still have a decent life. And they have social support system, your khandan, your friends, your extended relatives, others are there. So you're not desperate. Whereas the same person going to a city, you know what happens? People migrate from Bihar, let's say, to Hyderabad or Mumbai or some other city. 15, 20 years, they have to live alone. To start with, you cannot live with the family. You cannot afford the family to live with you. You have very abysmal wages. You have no home. You have to travel 15, 20 kilometers to go to work. One day you're sick or one day you lose the job, you're desperate. This is no life. You have to create small towns. So unless we have an all-round strategy, how to improve the skills, how to grow the economy, and how to spread the fruits of development on a much wider scale. These three things must come together. Any one, any two are not enough. But this is the greatest challenge of your generation. Today's India, there's no greater task, there's no more important task than this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the way you mentioned about structuring, basically in introducing a structure to the way we approach urban planning, that is something which should definitely be looked into. Sir, I'd like to ask you something from your own background. So, you are obviously an IAS officer, and I think you joined civil services in 1980, if I'm not wrong, after UPSC. Yeah. So what do you think? What is your opinion about administrative officers with regards to how they can bring changes in the socio-economic status, and what role do you think they can play in terms of bringing quality education to every single household in rural India? What is the role of the administration, the public servants in this regard?
Agree. Whatever be the political system we have, whatever the policies we adopt, ultimately we require competent managers in the public domain to deliver. So there cannot be two opinions about that. But they cannot do everything. Only when there is the right policy and right political direction can the administration deliver. So you must not overestimate the capacity of administration to deliver autonomously. At the same time, there is sufficient space to really improve the outcome, particularly if the conditions are a little more favorable. But have we really done it? For instance, There's nothing that prevented us to improve the education in the country. I don't think it is the Prime Minister or a Chief Minister who dictated education policy or educational, the way examinations are conducted or the papers are set or something else happens. It is the bureaucracy across the board. Let us honestly admit, bureaucracy has failed. I don't want to blame any X, Y, Z, but our exaggerated notion that no, these fellows are wonderful and they're all stopped from doing good things by the dirty politicians is a completely overblown case. It's not entirely true. I'm not saying there's some others are angels. I'm saying we're all part of this terrible vicious cycle. Bureaucracy has been a part of the problem. Now at least we must wake up. And there, of course, individuals are outstanding. This is about the system I'm talking about. There are individuals who made and who are making a phenomenal contribution. Now that, at least in terms of education, there is a greater space available. The national education policy, for the first time, used the word outcomes. It's a shame that until now, never in our education policy do we talk about outcomes. That expression itself is missing. We talked about enrollment, we talked about something else, we never talked about outcomes. Look at the 2009 Right to Education Act. Well-meaning law, but how silly some of the legal provisions are. It said, if an illiterate child is admitted to school, that child must go into age-appropriate class, not learning-appropriate class. If I'm illiterate, but I'm 12 years old, they said you must go into 7th grade because 12 years old must be 7th grade. What kind of a logic is that? How absurd can you be? And it never talked about evaluation and assessment. It prevented detentions. Well, you cannot fail and detain people casually, but unless there is a benchmark, a goal, honestly assessed, and a need to do well, it's absurd to think that you will actually perform well. So there are many things wrong with our thinking so far. For the first time, at least the national education policy looks at these things a little more honestly. And therefore, administration has an opportunity if you want to do it. But a policy written by somebody and available in Delhi doesn't mean the country will change. There are 280 million kids in schools. There are 40 million kids in colleges. Unless it becomes a movement, unless every administrator, every parent, every college, every institution, every school embraces it, it will not happen. Therefore, in providing that leadership and the drive and dynamism locally, dovetailing resources and administrative attention and public attention locally, the administration has a phenomenal role. Will they embrace that? Or will they want to go for the glitz and glamour and be more loyal than the political masters to curry favor? We'll have to wait and see. I hope they will do this right.
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting take on the role of bureaucracy and how we can deal with that. So what are your insights on taking up politics as a career option? And yeah, like in general, what I would, if you don't mind, sir, I'd like you to share your own journey, as in what was your perspective? Why did you take the plunge? And yeah, what was
just adding a question here.
Mhm.
Like, what are your insights on taking politics as a career option? So adding the question is like, in your point of view, nowadays like very young politicians are coming up. So whether the experienced politicians or it's like the young generation, who can do better? Give me just an explanation again.
It's a great question. It's also a painful question to answer for anybody honestly. The theoretical and the idealistic approach is, look, we all must play a role in politics, take it seriously, take it as a career and do whatever you can. A generic principle, it is true. Without us being engaged and taking politics seriously, our withdrawing and using pejorative expressions and treating politics as villain is an absurd notion. But truthfully, what is the current situation? In large parts of the country, the requirements of political recruitment in India are, the first question they often ask if you want to, let's say, contest in elections, if you say politics as contesting in elections, how much money can you spend? And the money is not in lakhs, the money is crores, in some cases, tens of crores. The second question is, what is your caste? The third question is, who is your father? What's your pedigree? And if you add another qualification of criminality means you already have money. And no criminal entered politics without enveloping himself in the caste or community. Therefore, he already emerged as a caste or community leader. Therefore, you have the caste community tag. And you have already muscle power. You have 20, 30, 40 thugs who are loyal to you and will do whatever it takes. And therefore, you are more electable. Now, in that climate, if you're asked to spend 20, 30 crores to be elected and then maintain integrity on a sustained basis, it's an absurd notion. So, except for a few fortunate ones because of family background or whatever, there is very little space in electoral politics at the state and national level right now. Let me be very candid. But you can still play a role because I think at least some of the parties are recognizing the role of modernizing politics, the need for modernizing politics, and they're trying to take some bright young people. And instead of, in addition to merely working as their pawns to use your technology for their electoral ends, you must also insist on having a space at the table. Whatever we're discussing, what kind of policies are required, how do you re-engineer the Indian state, how do you improve the rule of law, how do you improve the education or healthcare or infrastructure or something else. Unless youngsters are encouraged to play that role, unless you insist on playing that role, even if electoral politics doesn't always give you space initially, the party's agenda must be informed by your insights, your passion and your understanding. I think that there is space because they need you. Increasingly, they are seeking people like you for technology background to reach out to voters, to do whatever it takes to win elections. Good. But go beyond that. Don't become merely tools. Insist on that. The second way of engaging in politics is if you identify issues that matter to us. Today, for instance, education naturally came up in a serious issue. Can we play a significant role in improving the quality of education? It is politics with a small p. It's not about politics of who is getting into power, politics of contesting elections, but politics of actually changing things one step at a time and choosing a sector where you're passionate about, where you have skills and value and impact, as the word was used rightly by Dinarazu, the impact you can create, and then trying to make an impact. And there are ways of doing it in this technology age. A lot of these monumental challenges can be overcome by very judicious use of technology and innovation and accelerate the pace of progress. The third is be engaged locally. If only local governments are really effective and powerful, and they are not, unfortunately, we created very innervated local governments, perfunctory local governments. But wherever they are effective and powerful, first fight for local government empowerment. And in local government, at least if not immediately, slowly individual ability and credibility will play a bigger role than money if they are truly empowered. So without money power, maybe quite a few young people can actually make an impact locally in their town and city, and then emerge as leaders in an authentic way later on. So these are the three broad things. I don't really have the heart to tell you untruthfully that no, you just enter politics and you just contest elections, everything will be okay. It's not true. And my own journey, very briefly, I didn't seek to ever enter politics. Like many middle class fellows, I think I was also cowardly and anything but not politics. It was emergency that changed my life as a youngster. It was 25 years now, silver jubilee of Indian independence. People started asking questions as the first flush of an enthusiasm about democracy and freedom started giving way to reality. And unemployment, poverty, corruption, the three perpetual problems were very prominently in display. People started questioning, agitating, young people were protesting. The governing system and the political system should have then embraced these young people and then actually generated an honest dialogue. Where have we done right? Where have we gone wrong? What would you need to do to make India better? Instead, the state became repressive, imposed emergency, incarcerated 100,000 people, extinguished liberty, and so on and so forth. And I was one of those very fiercely opposed to emergency between 1975 and 77, before most of the parents of the IIT students of Kharagpur were born. You can't imagine the amount of passion and anger and energy that we had at the time on that issue. I was not in jail because I was a nobody. In India, if you're a nobody, they don't know what to do with you. But I was kept under surveillance, as I got to know later. The emergency was lifted, luckily for the country, in an election in a remarkable way, probably one of the finest examples of how democracy sometimes can work actually. In 77, the poor illiterate voters of India defeated the mighty political party and their leaders in a dramatic sweep. And freedom was restored, and we all hoped that a Gandhian revolution was in the offing. Very soon we realized that except freedom, nothing much happened. It's the same game played in the same way. It is that anger and anguish that led me to civil services. Because for an impecunious young person, But that was an option, and just then doctors were allowed. Until that time, doctors were prohibited from joining civil services. Don't ask me why. In India, many things happened like that. This prohibition, license, permit, control. Just then, a Kothari Commission recommended removal of this ban on doctors, and then that came to my notice. Somebody suggested, I just jumped at it and got into service. I enjoyed immensely my work in government. I was regarded as one of the most successful officials in the history of independent India. I have no personal problems. But I was always aware, while I was lionized by the system, by the people, I was aware that I was accomplishing maybe a 30 or 40 on a scale of 100. Not for want of intentions or efforts, because of systemic constraints. Because the average outcome was only about maybe 5 or 10, your 30, 40 makes you a superhero. But I was mindful of the 60 or 70 that is not accomplished. You may be happy, in the kingdom of the blind, one-eyed man is the king. You may be happy as a one-eyed man, but if you really have both eyes, and if you look at the way the system is functioning, truthfully, you must admit that we are getting much less than what we deserve and what we need as a country. And that gave a search for solutions. So luckily, a civil service job or some other opportunity like that, no, it gives you a ringside seat to understand the political economy, where you have done right, where you have done wrong, what needs to be done. Once you understand that, you have only one choice, either to fight for that, because that's the reason why I entered civil services, or because you already acquired a name and reputation, you have status, you have rank, you have everything, you have prestige and you have influence. Therefore, you continue to do whatever you can. Obviously, I didn't join the services for a career or a job, and for the same reason, I quit it, and I did not join politics. I built a civil society movement, a very strong civil society movement. India, one of India's best movements, on an enduring basis, with hundreds of thousands of formal members, organizations, structure, many activities, and several reforms, small but significant ones. Like, we were the reason why the short delivery in petrol stations all over the country ended by a very innovative campaign, very meticulously thought out and researched. It was us, we started identifying criminals in politics that led ultimately to the law on candidate disclosures. I mentioned to you briefly on the political funding law, the local courts law, the Right to Information Act later on, the National Health Mission, and I can go on and on. 91st Amendment to the Constitution, 97th Amendment, cooperative autonomy, 99th Amendment creating National Judicial Commission. All these were creations of Lok Satta movement's work in the country. But we felt at a time, after 10 years or so, no matter how much we accomplish, the big changes are eluding us. The political system was not responsive. Now, we felt that if at least we can garner, let's say, 10% of vote consistently, India is growing, young people are becoming more aware, we are getting exposed to the rest of the world, there's greater urbanization, and therefore we felt maybe 10% people are ready. If they are willing to embrace the idea of the significant reforms required and use their voice for that and vote for that, then we can push the system. The big parties will then respond. They have no choice. 10% will not give you any power, but it will give you voice. But our experience showed us in at least our parts of the country, 10% vote is not there. In Hyderabad city, we're getting 8 to 10% vote. In our electoral system, a third party will diminish very quickly because it's only meant for two parties. One more vote you win, one less vote you lose. And rural areas, we're getting only 1% vote or so. We have a lot of credibility and name recognition and respect. That's not translated into votes for a variety of other reasons. And that's when we decided we will not be electorally active. So we're the party continues, but there's no election. We don't contest in elections. But we fight, we do, whatever be the form, we do the same things, fight for changes in the country, in governance and politics.
Sir, I feel first of all that is a very interesting way to go about for any political party to go about with regards to public service and all. I think as we delve more and more into the intersection of money, power, and justice. Now, justice, obviously, the judiciary is one of the three wings of a democracy, and the one that is supposed to be independent of the other two, namely legislation and executive. So, what are the specific actions that you would propose to mitigate the influence of financial interests on the legal system? And I feel with regards to the judiciary, there's the importance of public confidence and public sentiment is also very important with regards to our judicial system. So, how do you intend to rebuild or recalibrate or maybe increase the public confidence in the fairness and impartiality of our judiciary?
There are 6 layers here. It's a very complex issue, and we have done detailed study, thinking, advocacy. I was the one who fought for and got the National Judicial Commission by 19th Amendment, which Supreme Court unwisely quashed it. An unconstitutional, self-serving order, I can tell you categorically. I was the one who got the local courts law enacted in 2009, finally, but they were hardly implemented anywhere. So it's not merely talk, it's a lot of experience and action. The first thing is crime investigation. Unless we insulate the crime investigation from political vagaries, at the same time make it effective, but there's a third element, also make it accountable. All three are required. Insulation to ensure impartiality and fairness, effectiveness to actually ensure justice, because if you are utterly honest but you're utterly ineffective, there's no use at all. And the third is accountable, because power without accountability of that kind is disastrous. In fact, I would prefer them not having the power or being ineffective rather than being very effective and powerful without accountability, because the power of the uniform and the gun without accountability is a disaster for the country. We must carefully structure it. All the countries which reform their criminal justice system, they put all these three elements very carefully. For instance, I remember going to New South Wales state, of which Sydney is the capital in Australia, where they designed a very intricate mechanism to empower and to hold them to account, layer upon layer. It requires very complex, because power will be abused inevitably, and power of that kind will be abused enormously. Right now in Telangana, there's a big controversy going on. Under certain laws, you can monitor the private telephone conversations under law. Now, if there are no enough safeguards, obviously they are used against political opponents. That is a well understood problem. But there's much more dangerous is a rogue policeman becoming like mafia. They have access to all your and my telephone calls, and there are many people who may have less than satisfactory personal lives, or given Indian economy, still a lot of cash transactions and some other things happening in the country, and using that as a means to blackmail and extort enormous amounts of money. It's an extremely dangerous trend. So crime investigation is the first one. Prosecution, equally all the three elements. Indian prosecution is the weakest link, actually, even worse than the police. There's hardly any serious prosecution in India. In most cases, an incompetent, politically connected person is made a prosecutor. They don't care a damn about justice or public good. And 90% cases in India end up in failure. There's no conviction. Conviction rate increases only because many of the poor, either because they were beaten up or otherwise, they confess to small crimes. If you ignore that, conviction rate in India is the lowest in the world. Go to the West, 90% conviction is common, because the case is prepared thoroughly, meticulously, and there are safeguards. And once it comes to prosecution stage, conviction is almost certain. In India, I think nobody seriously is worried about conviction unless you are desperately poor. The third is forensics. Even today, most of evidence gathering is very desultory, and you beat the hell out of a fellow and extract a confession. That's not evidence gathering. Interrogation of 7-8 hours, putting them, that's not evidence gathering. You have so much of technology, and it's a low-cost operation. For a country of India says all it costs about 1,000-2,000 crores is peanuts to improve forensics. So forensics. The fourth is procedures. Recently, the Parliament enacted 3 laws: Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code, and Indian Evidence Act. A priceless opportunity was squandered. These are laws that are made once in a century, or once in a generation, once in a half century or century, or once in a century and a half. A priceless opportunity wasted. They were perfunctory changes, pretending to make big changes. There's a lot of detail required, and a lot of people have worked on that. Malamat Committee, led by Justice Malamat, gave a very detailed and very robust set of recommendations, very practical set of recommendations. So the procedures. The fifth element is trial courts. It's not the high courts and Supreme Courts where justice is delivered. It's the trial courts. Whether criminal justice or civil justice, trial courts. There's a radical need for improvement apart from procedures. The quality of judges, monitoring the judges' performance, giving them adequate support. The rest of the world, there are plenty of examples. We don't have to think alone. The world gives you all the examples and experiences. We have to borrow the best practices. And finally, higher judiciary. Higher judiciary quality of recruitment is very poor. It's all khandaniyat, or it's all, I know the lawyer kind of a thing. You require an Indian judicial service. The prestige that all India services carry, at least that one thing we must utilize to improve the quality of judiciary. Because no Good lawyer wants to be a judge. A lawyer makes 100 times that the judge makes. And I'm not exaggerating. So unless we create a framework in which bright young people want to join for justice and they can rise, and unless the higher courts actually act responsibly, they're acting worse than trial courts. Hundreds of thousands of cases in high courts, tens of thousands of cases in Supreme Court, it's absurd. In the United States, the Supreme Court hears about 100 cases in a year, period. Hears them on a day-to-day basis, period. If some cases are not heard, those cases, they're over. They're not taken up because that case will come up on some other day because only constitutional matters they hear. Our Supreme Court has become a glorified trial court. It would radically transform that. And there are many things to be done there. So all these, even if we can't do them together, it's too big a task and there are so many West interests aligned against it, but you can do piecemeal, step by step. Each one will help, but together it will help a great deal more. But first we must create a constituency and focus on that. And we also must take justice administration very seriously. We are spending, I think, only about I don't remember the exact amount. I think it's about 0.9% of the GDP or so, which is incredibly low for the whole of justice system, including the policing. It has to be more. But money is not the only issue. There's a lot more to it.
So thank you, sir. I think we'll end up the question and answer. Like we'll just go for the interaction. So I request students, those who want to ask question to Dr. JP sir, please raise your hands and we'll be giving access. And I request you to make sure that your question is very short. Hariom, give access to the person who has raised the hand.
Yeah. Sriram, go ahead. Now you can ask questions.
Sriyam?
Yes, sir. As the leading light of liberalism in India, do you think that we can learn from the success of Javier Milei in Argentina, as they're also a socialist country and they have also been gripped by inflation and economic mismanagement for years?
You're talking of the newly elected president?
Yes, sir. Argentina's Milei.
He seems to have extremely radical ideas of liberalism. Let's see to what extent it will work. He's going to the extent of saying that the central bank should be abolished, if I'm not mistaken. And you must embrace the American currency, right? So
Yes.
some of them may be radical ideas, but basically, it's very hard to build a political constituency for true liberalism. This may be an exception where an extreme liberal or libertarian actually was elected president. It also shows of the instability in the country, political instability and volatility in the country. Otherwise, even in very mature societies where market economy and liberalism are understood, liberalism as a political force is not always strong because in real politics in a democracy, you have to combine judiciously the short-term welfare, the long-term growth, and address the fears and concerns of many people.
Is it possible to replicate that in India?
Electorally, no, not only in India, almost nowhere in the world. Argentina is almost a standalone case. There is no other case of an extreme libertarian individual becoming a head of government through an election. So if it didn't happen anywhere else, it will happen here, not happen here. But the idea of liberal philosophy and liberal agenda, liberal market economy policies, and to the extent feasible, the social policies, of course, there is space. And that's already happening in the world. You take, for instance, women's reproductive rights. It's a libertarian agenda. We don't speak about it. For a country which is so tradition-bound, I don't want to mention the number because I don't want to alert other people and then create a problem in India. Millions of medical terminations of pregnancy are happening out of the free will of the women, giving them independence and rights, reproductive rights, without a fuss, without a problem, without state creating a problem. It's a miracle. It is a libertarian agenda. The whole economic liberalization, though limited it is, whatever extent it happened, libertarian agenda, but the same libertarian agenda or liberal agenda in terms of agricultural laws, the three agricultural laws are partly liberal agenda. They failed because the political conscience is lacking. Even if the government had legal power, the farmers were misinformed, they were wrong. The plight of the farmers is genuine and real, no question about it. I'm a farmer's man. But the demands they're making are irrational and unproductive. These are two different things. You've seen what is happening. So to build a consensus in a country like India, where there's so much of misinformation, so much of myth, even today to say that There's no need for government to fund public sector enterprises. Let the market take care of it. Let the government do its job. You know how incredibly hard it is to persuade people? So you must be very judicious. You must also marshal your forces very productively. A wise general chooses his battlefields very carefully. If you dissipate your energy, you have nothing left to do the big things.
Then Sagar, you can go with the question.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for such an insightful session. My question is, we tend to see a lot of students taking up leadership positions in student and college life. As a nation, we want to produce a generation of world leaders. So what qualities would you deem important in a student leader at a college level that would mold him or her into an ideal citizen, who become an asset to national asset kind of in years to come?
Sagar, you know, and all of you, in fact, know exactly what qualities are required. So if I say all this, it will be tautology, it will be a waste of time. But if we're coming to another point, a related point, let me mention 3 skills that are required, not so much qualities. What is public good? How is it different from private good? The first challenge is, which is common with private sector and individuals also, how do you reconcile the limited resources with unlimited needs and wants? There's a cruel challenge. You know, the courts pretend as if there's no limitation of resources. They can be popular everywhere. In real life, there's a limitation of resources, time, energy, and money. And you can only do some things. You must decide what to do. That ability to prioritize and persuade people is one of the great skills required in any kind of public life. The second is, particularly in a complex and diverse society like ours, how do you reconcile the conflicting views and differences in this society in a harmonious manner? Caste, money, ideas, urban, rural, region, language, in 22 languages. How do you reconcile all these and then bring unity? The third is perhaps the hardest. Right now, it's proving to be very difficult. There's always a temptation in a personal life or a collective life to yield to the demands of the short-term considerations. No, I want to enjoy today. I want to go to a movie, I want to eat ice cream, I want to do something else, I want something, I don't want to exercise, I want to study, I don't. It's human nature, right? But there's a tomorrow. So while taking care of today's needs, how do you actually inspire them to build a tomorrow with a little bit of sacrifice today? The short term versus the long term. We are only focusing on individual qualities and morality. All that necessary is obvious. But if these 3 skills are not there, a person will not be really effective in delivering outcomes in public life. Now, having said that, what can the student community do? What I think needs to be done is, if you can demonstrate in colleges a different kind of politics, what's happening, unfortunately, is the colleges are imitating real life outside, instead of colleges setting a standard and influencing the life outside. So all the unhappy practices of electoral politics of India are now seen increasingly in colleges and union elections. Can we think of a different electoral system in colleges to actually allow merit to come to the fore? Can we redefine the agenda instead of this silly sloganeering of left versus right and go into problem-solving mode with skills and with deeper analysis and understanding? Can we exhibit great intellectualism instead of this narabaji? No, if colleges actually can demonstrate that, at least some of the better institutions can demonstrate that, people of my kind, our hope is, maybe that will influence politics outside. We can show the example and say, aren't we ashamed? Can't we learn at least from our children? Damn it, can't we change? Instead, they're influencing college politics, university politics. And students are becoming pawns in the hands of this ugly political system where there's no agenda, there's no idea of a sense of solutions, there's no idealism, there's no practical ability to solve real challenges. We discussed so many today, but it's all about slogans and abuse and rhetoric. I hope that will happen, because while a bulk of Indian students are denied the quality education that they deserve, at least 10-15% are getting some decent quality. There's so much of talent in this country and passion. Even this 10-15% is a phenomenal force if you utilize it well.
Thank you,
This
sir.
is the last question. Hariom, give access to Meduri Harshit.
Yeah, done.
Go ahead with your question, Harshit.
Yeah, hello, I'm audible.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay.
Come up.
Thank you so much, sir, for this incredible session, and thank you guys. Sir, I wanted to ask this question like about regarding this freebies, which almost every state government and also the central government is doing these days, like mostly to attract voters, I guess. But like in every case, like let it be for the farmers or for education, like for students and for other particular sections of the society, especially in Andhra Pradesh. So why is it being done like that? So like there are many good ways to implement that in a different way. Like instead of giving directly money to the people, like making it a post pay option. Like if there's a student, instead of giving him 15,000 or 20,000 per year to help his tuition fees and other things, instead of that, let their parents pay the fee, and after his education and or just immediately after they pay, then the government can subsidize them the exact same amount afterwards. So instead of giving directly money to them. So why is it not being implemented? Is it only because of like they would lose a lot of voters, or is there any other reason behind this?
That's a great question. Where do you raise it?
Yes, sir.
It's a great question. Thank you for that. I know, first of all, in a poor society, in fact, in a democracy, even if you're not poor, some amount of welfare is inevitable. You have to carry all sections with you. There are people who are not always fortunate. There are some expectations. Therefore, to say a democratic political system can survive without taking care of the short-term needs to some extent is absurd. All we require is a balance. In that, at least when there is welfare, how do you administer welfare is the question you're asking. You are absolutely right. Take Andhra Pradesh. For those who are not familiar, each parent of a child going to school, any school, is getting annually, I think, some 15,000 rupees or so. No questions asked, just because your child is going to school. It is actually a freebie in the name of education. Supposing, as Meduri is suggesting, we link it to educational outcomes. We also improve the outcomes. Well, there are simple ways of doing that at a low cost, because already the state is spending about 90,000 rupees per child at school level, those who are going to government schools. So by spending just another 300, 500 rupees in a judicious manner by improving the evaluation and viewing a few other things, you can radically improve the outcomes. But that's not what is getting the votes, because that means you actually have to produce the outcomes, you have to prove it, you have to persuade people that it's worthwhile in their lives. Whereas if I give money, there's a feeling that there's a greater likelihood of vote being transactional. And the concern of these fellows is not at all to improve the quality of education or to eliminate the caste discrimination, give them the productive potential, etc. Nothing of the kind. The concern is only one thing: to get the damn vote. I don't care about the consequences. That is the problem. The nature of administration of welfare, even when welfare is warranted, it can be much more innovative to generate better outcomes and alter the incentives. The third issue is we must bring a balance between welfare and long-term good. I have a simple formula, which is a very commonsensical formula, what the economists call the golden rule. Your parents and my parents, what did they do? What do they do? They make sure they take care of your current needs. But they never borrow to meet your current needs, unless it's for education, which is investment in the future or something like that. Basically, they make sure that the borrowed money enhances your earning capacity tomorrow. That means you build the assets, you build a business, or you invest the money wisely to get in future income, so that borrowings will not become a burden on the next generation. Whereas current expenditure is met from current revenue. In fact, thrifty families, and most families in India are thrifty, they save money in the current expenditure. That means if my income is 1 lakh rupees, I spend only 50,000 rupees and save 50,000 rupees. That is prudent. At the very least, I don't spend 150,000 rupees for day-to-day expenditure. That's how our families are managed. Our governments manage exactly in the opposite way. Today, the current expenditure, salaries, pensions, interest payments, and these welfare is not enough to meet from the salary, from the current revenue, either the state's own revenue or the government of India's transfers. In many states, it's 150%, 180%. It's ridiculous. You can't run a country like that because you're running up debts at the cost of the future. So at the very least, If we create a framework in which all your current expenditure, your salaries, etc., interest payments, because the debt is there already, you have to pay interest, there's no choice, and your welfare together are met with the current revenues and transfers from Government of India. And borrowings will be used only for building the economy, infrastructure, investment promotion, and asset building, so that the future is taken care of. I think that simple rule, if you follow, and there is a way of doing it, Constitution allows it. Union government has a responsibility because there's only one government in the country in terms of fiscal responsibility. The state governments cannot go bankrupt. The credit of the Union of India is credit of India. The financial stability of India's stability, not Bihar stability, not the Telangana stability, not Karnataka stability. Therefore, the government of India is given that constitutional role under Article 293 of the Constitution, other provisions, and we must tighten them to make sure that they're equitably, uniformly, impartially implemented across the country. I think the time is right now. We're working very hard at it.
Thank you, sir. So I think we have done with the question from that side. And so I just want to end up with a short note. And so I'm very much thankful. Thank you for you for giving this wonderful opportunity for us students like us, because because we have a lot of knowledge in the world. Like we can see YouTube, the social media everywhere, but the quality of education, the quality of knowledge is very less. So I think today many of our students and myself, we got some clarity, and I would like to thank once again the Public Policy and Governance Society, and as well Ankit Garu and FDR Foundation for taking this platform and making educating students as well.
Thank you, Dinaraj. One sentence: don't despair. You are the hope. When there are many problems, there are also many opportunities. And technology gives us fantastic opportunity to leapfrog, to do things which we failed to do earlier. We can accelerate the progress. And there are simple, practical solutions from our own past experience, your innovation, and the best practices in the world. So there's none of these challenges which has no answer. All these problems are sensible answers. Our work is to work collectively, improve the solutions, innovate better, and then push the system towards those changes by collective assertion. I'm glad that you're paying attention to that. We're proud of all of you. You have created a brand, all the IITs, and you're making a phenomenal impact in the world and in India. And you'll continue to make that impact. But if you really combine our energies and look at public systems in a little more clear manner, not only private innovation and private sector and corporate growth, but public systems, if you pay attention, I think enormous achievement is possible, and we are on the cusp of that. I'm a great optimist. There are some challenges I understand, and we can make a much better India. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your time.
Thank you for the audience to join. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining, and please follow the Public Policy Government Society. It's a very good opportunity for the first and the early stages of students who want to pursue the government exams and all this, because the total discussion which has happened right now it's all about the impact. It's very clear. We want to convey to the students the message that make sure whatever the work you're doing, whatever the things you're observing around, it should show some impact on your life. So that's what I suggest you people to think once again regarding what exactly you're doing and where you want to go. So follow your senior suggestions, be in a good guidance, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity once again for the PPGS, and loving joining in this type of interaction. Looking forward for more. Yeah. Thank you, the team. They worked very hard.